An entire phase has passed in the MCU since Iron Man has been present, leaving a rogues gallery of infamous Iron baddies behind. These are 20 Iron Man villains that could appear in Phase 5.
Alright, I think we got this. Send them all.
We start off our list with a prominent Iron villain in the comics who was a one-off baddie in the MCU that hasn't been seen in quite some time. Justin Hammer was last seen during Marvel's one-shot All Hail the King, serving his time in Seagate prison for hijacking the Iron Legion in Iron Man 2. Rather than the embarrassing comedic relief as seen in the aforementioned features, Justin Hammer is a much more calculated and nefarious foe in the comics, and plays a role in the Armor Wars story arc that the Phase 5 movie of the same name will surely draw inspiration from. Is it possible that Justin Hammer served his time or bribed his way out of jail and will be revealed as a man behind the curtain during Armor Wars or Ironheart? Ted Calloway is the SPYMASTER, and SPYMASTER is, well, a master spy, an expert marksman and exceptional boxer. Calloway is proficient with gadgets and gizmos, and is a master of disguise as well. SPYMASTER has gone as far as to infiltrate Stark Industries on a few occasions and has not only attempted to steal the Iron Man armor, but kidnapped Tony Stark himself as well. SPYMASTER is the perfect street-level villain to bring into the MCU during one of the many series they have coming up in Phase 5. Formerly known as Whitney Frost, Julieta Nefaria is also known as Madame Masque. While Julieta attempts to take down Iron Man, she grows very fond of Tony Stark in the process. In fits of jealous rage, the Madame has captured and tortured Pepper Potts, and the two have thrown fisticuffs over Tony Stark's love, with Pepper coming out on top. Daughter of Count Nefaria, who we will talk about much later on the list, Madame Masque is a paranoid woman who is proficient with firearms and other weaponry. Although she does not possess any superpowers, Masque has trained her mind to resist telepathic attacks. Do you think Madame Masque could appear during Phase 5? Ghost from the comics and most animated series is a nameless, enigmatic data engineer who infused his body with ghost tech, creating a suit to accompany his enhancements, which enables invisibility and intangibility. In the MCU, Ghost is Ava Starr, a young woman suffering from constant pain due to the same invisible and intangible powers that she garnered due to a lab accident that also killed her parents. Ava's suit stabilizes her powers as opposed to giving her powers. One thing the comic book and MCU versions of Ghost have in common besides aesthetics is that they're both eventual members of the anti-hero super team, the Thunderbolts. Coincidentally enough, Ava Starr is making her next MCU appearance in the Thunderbolts movie, which is set to end Phase 5. Basil Sandhurst would also become the Controller after a chemical accident left him scarred, and he constructed a powerful exoskeleton suit for mobility. Using his mental wave absorption, Controller also uses what he calls slave discs for, well, mind control purposes, duh. The Controller has been frequently defeated by Iron Man, but he is relentless in his plans for world domination. Although we haven't seen the Controller in the MCU yet, my theory is that the MCU Armor Wars will be fought between a legion of heroic Iron people and evil Iron monstrosities constructed by the likes of Justin Hammer and others. Jack Taggart, the man synonymous with the Firepower moniker in the comics, unfortunately never donned his armor in the MCU and was destroyed during Iron Man 3. But you and I both know that when it comes to Stark Tech supersuits, there is always someone somewhere trying to steal, replicate, and weaponize Iron Man's armor. Firepower is heavily involved in the Armor Wars series from the comics, and like most of the other enemies on our list, the suit and the title can be designated to any character, really. That being said, the Firepower armor could totally show up in the upcoming phase of the MCU. Gary Gilbert was a radical political activist and amateur physicist who developed the FIREBRAND battlesuit, featuring micro-circuited motors that increase his strength. FIREBRAND's armor can also project intense heat beams, which he even used to exterminate the Punisher's family. Frank Castle would exact revenge and end Gary Gilbert in return. However, we have not met these characters inside of the MCU yet. We know that Daredevil, Born Again, is on its way in Phase 5, and the rest of the Netflix Defenders are rumored to be joining the MCU as well. Is it possible that Firebrand could be introduced during a Punisher series in Phase 5 or 6? There are two prominent versions of Blizzard in Marvel Comics. Originally a cryonic suit invented by the scientist Gregor Shapanka, who was obsessed with immortality, the Blizzard mantle would eventually be passed on by Hammer Industries to a criminal called Donald Gill. Not only is Donnie connected with the likes of the Hand, but on top of wearing the Blizzard armor, he is also an Inhuman with the ability to manipulate electrical currents. In the MCU, Donnie Gill was present during the Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. as a human character that garnered strictly ice powers after a prank gone wrong, with no need for the Blizzard battlesuit. At this point, it is still unclear if the Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. series is a part of the main MCU timeline canon, or if Marvel will do what most of us anticipate will happen, and explain the show away as an alternate universe. Originally using laser diodes that were implanted into his skin, Arthur Parks is the living laser, who currently exists as a bodiless quantity of protons possessing human consciousness. Another scientist turned super villain, a trope that will never get old. Living Laser is one of Iron Man's most enduring villains in the comics, and someone we have yet to meet inside the MCU. If you grew up watching the Iron Man animated series from the 90s, you might think that Grey Gargoyle was a main antagonist to Tony Stark. Originally introduced as a part of Thor's Rogues Gallery, chemist Dr. Paul Duval, another scientist, go figure, spilled an unknown organic substance on his hand, transforming him into the Grey Gargoyle. Made entirely of stone-like material, Duval is still capable of movement and full physical functionality, including flight, not to mention his ability to transmutate objects into solid stone. If we are to meet a villain with the characteristics of Grey Gargoyle in the MCU, I would assume it would most likely happen during whatever the next Thor film will be, considering the types of creatures and attributes we've seen in the God of Thunder's franchise thus far. Besides, he wouldn't be the first rock monster in a Thor movie. Ezekiel Stane, or simply Zeke, is the son of Obadiah Stane, and like his father, has even used the Iron Monger moniker on occasion. What sets Ezekiel apart from most Iron people is that he has been biologically enhanced on top of using armored battlesuits. Although we have not seen Zeke in the MCU thus far, that does not mean he doesn't exist, lurking in the shadows, waiting for the perfect opportunity to exact revenge on Tony Stark's legacy and his family. Could you imagine a storyline in the MCU where Zeke keeps the Stane versus Stark feud alive through the next generation? Norman Osborn is not only one of Spider-Man's greatest foes as the nefarious Green Goblin, but as an industrialist and scientist, Osborn also rivals Tony Stark in more than one domain. At one point in comic book history, Norman Osborn convinced everyone he was a babyface and became the Iron Patriot. Bad guys are gonna bad guy though, and ultimately Osborn would become an upfront supervillain once more. He currently uses the alias of Gold Goblin in the comics, although the Green Goblin was killed at the end of Spider-Man No Way Home. That was a variant version of Osborn from the Raimi-verse. With Norman Osborn set to be a major character in the Spider-Man freshman year animated series, it's only a matter of time before we meet primary MCU Earth 616 Norman Osborn as well. The Crimson Dynamo is Rush's attempt at counteracting and taking out Iron Man. There have been nearly 30 different Crimson Dynamos since the inception of the character in the comics, as whoever dons the armor or any version of it uses the title of Crimson Dynamo as well. The OG Dynamo was the inventor Anton Vanko, who is also Whiplash. In the MCU, however, Vanko's son Ivan becomes Whiplash after Anton passes away, accusing Howard Stark of stealing his life's work, and we have not seen the Crimson Dynamo yet. With a handful of prominent Russian characters in the MCU already, including a similar Soviet Captain America counterpart in the Red Guardian, could the Crimson Dynamo armor be next up in Phase 5? One of Iron Man's oldest foes, Boris Bulsky, rose the ranks of the Soviet government and worked alongside the previously mentioned Anton Vanko in a successful attempt at creating an armored battlesuit capable of defeating Iron Man. Becoming Titanium Man, Bulsky would unsuccessfully challenge Tony Stark on numerous occasions over the years. Like the Crimson Dynamo, Titanium Man's armor is an attempted replica of Iron Man's. However, Polsky has undergone various experiments which have greatly enhanced his human physiology, which in turn has also enhanced the functionality of his titanium armor. With strong ties to Russian characters that are currently at the forefront of the MCU, like the Black Widow for instance, could Crimson Dynamo and Titanium Man cross paths with Yelena Belova and the Red Guardian in the MCU? Arno Stark is the long-lost and equally intellectual brother of Tony Stark, who would go on to be known as Iron Man 2020. Born with a degenerative health defect, Maria and Howard Stark left Arno in a hospice, dependent on an iron lung. After being discovered by Tony decades later, the estranged brothers would work together and were friendly for the most part. Arno has shown a darker side and grew to dehumanize Tony at times. Not to mention his Earth 8410 variant was a straight-up villain before deciding to become a hero. In this universe, Arno is the one who owns Stark Industries, and with the multiverse being wide open in the MCU right now, it is definitely possible that an angry Stark relative comes out from the woodworks. Arno could have even been in the MCU this whole time, hidden away like he was in the comics. Temujin is another relative on this list that was kept a secret until he was conveniently needed in the comics. Funny how that seems to happen so very often. I digress. Temujin is the Mandarin son who was raised by monks and kept separate from the outside world. Just like his father, Temujin also uses power rings. However, he is capable of standing up to and fighting the likes of Iron Man in hand-to-hand combat without them. Although Temujin has not fought Iron Man a whole whack of times, the few encounters they have had have been quite memorable, as his martial arts skills rival the likes of his brother Shang-Chi, and even the Iron Fist. Shang-Chi would absolutely have a long-lost brother unbeknownst to him in the MCU, and in fact, that could be what the whole Shang-Chi sequel is built around come phases 5 or 6. Ultimo is one of Iron Man's greatest villains, a creature who was created by an alien humanoid robot race. Ultimo has had his programming altered by the likes of the Mandarin in attempts to take out Iron Man. Possessing nearly limitless durability and energy absorption, Ultimo is also like 300 feet tall or something, bro. It's crazy. On top of all that, he adapts reactively and can self-restore, meaning you can hit him with, let's say, a fireball and that does some damage, and then mere moments later, fireballs prove ineffective. I'm honestly shocked we never got to see Tony Stark throw down with the metal monstrosity Ultimo in the MCU, but that doesn't mean he couldn't show up during Phase 5. Fans thought that we would get a glance of Fin Fang Foom during Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings. However, that was not the case. Nonetheless, Fin Fang Foom is a recurring Iron Man villain in the comics and is a heavy hitter to boot. With one of the coolest names in comics, Fin Fang Foom is also a shape-shifting, extraterrestrial space dragon. Super trippy, bro. Connected to characters and organizations that have been introduced in the MCU already, such as the Mandarin and the Ten Rings, as well as the Hand, not to mention other dragons that we know exist in the primary cinematic universe. It could simply be a matter of time before Fin Fang Foom is angrily awakened from his slumber. Count Lucina Nefaria is a very powerful and very slept-on supervillain in Marvel Comics. A human who was subjected to a process which granted him the combined powers of a few other villains, one of which being the living laser who we discussed earlier on in this list. Count Nefaria possesses super strength and speed, energy projection, and is nigh immortal in his iconic energy form. Fighting against both the Avengers and the X-Men in the comics, it has been discovered that Nefaria's true weakness is adamantium, which coincidentally enough is on its way into the MCU officially when Deadpool and Wolverine presumably travel across the multiverse during Deadpool 3. Although that movie is slated for Phase 6. Marvel Studios tends to shake their timelines up on the fly more often than not, and because of this, perhaps we will see Count Nefaria make an on-screen appearance sooner rather than later. That's right, the most recent villainous, somewhat anti-hero character introduced in the MCU during Black Panther Wakanda Forever is also the last entry on our list. Namor, the Submariner, and Iron Man have come to blows numerous times over the course of Marvel history, with Namor generally being able to best Tony Stark more often than not. Although these two have teamed up on countless occasions, as well as both being founding members of the Illuminati, Namor has come close to killing Stark more often than once. Known also as Kukulkan in the MCU, Namor has already crossed paths with Ironheart, and it goes without question that we will see the feathered serpent god along with the Talokannian again during Phase 5. And that's our list. Did we leave anybody out? Who is your favorite Iron Man villain we might see in the MCU? Why is there so much beef within Marvel's scientific community? Let us know what you think in the comments below. And while you're at it, be sure to hit those like and subscribe buttons and enable notifications so you don't miss any conflicting comic content.